I'm going to be reviewing 4 games that I've played recently. Those games are going to be Flashpoint Fire Rescue, 7 Wonders, The Gallerist, and Clank In Space. Now, I'm not going to be going into tremendous detail here. I'm just going to be giving my kind of general thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like, and so on. So let's get started, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, so let's start with 7 Wonders. Now, 7 Wonders is a game that's kind of achieved immense popularity, a lot of acclaim, and is really highly regarded. And after playing it, I can really see why. So basically, 7 Wonders is a civilization building game based solely on card drafting. You're going to be doing a lot of other things that you'll expect from a Civ game, such as bolstering your military, improving your science, trading with your neighbours, and just stuff like that. But what makes 7 Wonders so different is the kind of flow of the game and its simplicity. Because every time you're just going to be given a bunch of cards and you're going to pick one of those cards that you most fancy and add it to your tableau. And then you're going to give those remaining cards to the player to your left or right. And because everybody is kind of selecting their cards simultaneously, there is really little downtime here, if any, in fact. So that kind of fluidity is not really generally associated with Civ games. And the fact that 7 Wonders actually accommodates, I think, up to 7 players without sacrificing any of its uptime is really impressive, because the game is only going to take about half an hour, regardless if you're playing with 3 players or 7 players. And that's because you're only ever interacting with the player to your left or right. And I think that's really quite impressive. I mean, obviously, with a game that's going to take half an hour, you're not going to get the kind of the strategic depth or complexity that you're going to get with a lot of other civilization games, such as Through the Ages, for example. But again, it's going to take a fraction of that time, so you're still going to get a good kind of a good taste, or that kind of that itch scratched for a kind of Civ building game. The kind of art of building something from scratch. So I think it's really kind of got a bit of a niche in that respect, because you're going to expect these kind of games to take hours, where this only takes half an hour. Now, I really did enjoy playing 7 Wonders, especially due to those facts I just mentioned. The short play time and the amount of uptime. But there's one kind of thing that slightly concerns me with the game, and that is in relation to the game's kind of replayability and variability, because I can really kind of foresee there being a very limited amount of strategies you can take. And that's because I think after playing this for an amount of time, you're going to start getting the same feel over and over again. Now, I haven't played this much, so I can't really back that claim up. So I'm going to have to play this a few more times before I can really tell if 7 Wonders can really go the distance. But it was just a concern I had, and one that I want to kind of find out before I maybe pick this one up for myself. So overall, I really did enjoy the game. I thought it was very clever. I love the fact that it plays so quickly and accommodates a good amount of players. So yeah, I was really impressed. I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10 as an initial kind of initial scoring. And I really would look forward to playing this one again. So yeah, 7 Wonders. I really recommend you give this one a try. And yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay, so the second game we're going to talk about is Clank In Space. Now, this is a deck builder crossed with a dungeon crawler that is set, obviously, in space. Now, the objective is to work against your opponents to navigate your way through this enemy spacecraft and grab an artifact and get the hell out of there before your opponents do. Now, I think from a deck building point of view, there's nothing really out of the ordinary here. It's pretty much everything you would expect. And that's with exception to the fact that movement is actually kind of a commodity on these cards. So you can kind of build your deck around being quicker, which is really important in relation to the actual dungeon crawling side of things. And I like that because movement is kind of very important into getting in and out quicker than your opponents. I kind of like that little spin on things. But the coolest mechanic about the game is this, I guess you'd call it the clank mechanism, I don't know, where certain cards, generally the more kind of powerful ones, come with a bit of a sacrifice. I guess thematically it means that you're kind of making noise. So every time you play a certain card, you're going to put a colour cube of your colour into an opaque bag. And basically every time the kind of deck building drafting row is replenished, there's a chance that the boss, or I guess an alien boss, attacks you. And what happens then is that you draw a couple of cubes blindly from the bag, and if they're your colour, then you actually take damage. And obviously if you run out of health, then you eventually die. So there's this real kind of gamble to, should I play these more expensive cards or these more powerful cards now, but risk being harmed down the road? Or, you know, am I going to get out before my my cubes are drafted? So I think that's a really cool idea. And this escalates well throughout the game as well, because as players are doing more things and navigating their way through these dungeons and hacking kind of computers and stuff like that, then the boss actually forces you to draw more cubes out each time. So as I said, there's a good scaling here. The tension does rise as the game goes on. So I do like that kind of race to get out, and the kind of tension, and am I going to make it out on time? So there are a lot of things I did like about the game, and generally I did enjoy it. The only problems I had with Clank In Space is in relation to its design and aesthetic. I really didn't like the artwork on the cards at all. I think it seemed like very unpolished, and it just seemed very kind of this cheap CGI kind of artwork, and I just didn't like it at all, and it kind of forced me to kind of disengage from the game a bit, because I'm a very visual person. I like games to look really nice, as I'm sure most people do. But also the board itself was very kind of convoluted and busy. There's just a lot to look at. I mean, once you get playing, it's really not an issue. Everything makes sense. But initially, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And I think that could possibly maybe, or potentially kind of persuade people not to play this. I mean, even when we were playing it, a lot of people were walking past and, God, that looks complicated. And it's not at all. So I think it could have been cleaned up a lot in relation to its artwork and in relation to the graphic design. But again, that's personal taste. I don't know if anybody else felt the same way. But overall, I do like the game. I would definitely play it again. But I think there are other deck builders out there that I prefer a lot more. Just thinking off the top of my head, Legendary I think it's a lot better than Clank, but again, that's just that's my taste. So I wouldn't go and pick Clank up because I've got Legendary to scratch that itch. So overall, yeah, a good game. I would play again, but I won't be picking this one up. That's Clank In Space. Okay, so let's talk about Flashpoint Fire Rescue. Now, this is a completely cooperative game where players assume the role of firefighters. So the objective is to try and navigate your way through this burning building and rescue civilians or from the same family and get them out of the building before the building collapses. Now, I really like the theme of this. It's really cool to look at. The components are very nice. And overall, it just looks really kind of cool. After playing it for a few turns, the game feels very familiar, and that is if you're familiar with the game Pandemic. The game kind of very strongly reminds me of Pandemic. The fact that everybody's kind of got a unique kind of power. Everybody has kind of 4 actions to take on their turn, such as moving, kind of cleaning, like on Pandemic where you clean a disease cube. Instead of taking a disease cube, you kind of extinguish a fire. So there are a lot of similarities with Pandemic, with Flashpoint. The only exception is, which actually are the things I really liked about the Flashpoint, were the kind of fact that you can break through walls and to make shortcuts, which obviously comes with a bit of a downside because you're going to make the building fall down quicker. But thematically, it works really well, like, breaking down the walls, and you can carry the victims over your shoulder and try to take them out of the building. That slows your movement down, for example. So there's some cool thematics here. But again, it just reminded me so much of Pandemic that I almost couldn't get that out of my head. Also, the way like the fire spreads in the house, it's done randomly by rolling dice, and so obviously that in itself is obviously very random, which makes the game a lot harder to kind of act tactically or act strategically. So that's something that Pandemic kind of does better than Flashpoint, because at least in Pandemic you can kind of say, I know what's going to come out next, so I can kind of prepare for that. This one you can't. So in a lot of respects, it's kind of a Pandemic light, because there are things that you just can't predict and you can't kind of mitigate. So I find it very hard to kind of find Flashpoint's kind of place in the kind of board game world, because a lot of people would regard Pandemic as a gateway game, where this is kind of a gateway to a gateway game. So I just don't see the place it holds. Don't get me wrong, it's a nice game. I did enjoy playing it, and I played it with some more casual players who really enjoyed it. But to me, the choices you made seemed a lot more obvious than I would kind of hope for. I mean, I felt like I could kind of quarterback the other players into making taking their turns as optimally as possible. So that kind of left me a bit kind of thinking, oh, this is a bit too light for me. This is, there's no need to really work together here, because I could just do all the best decisions myself and tell them what to do. But obviously I did do that, but I don't know, it just didn't kind of challenge me enough. I mean, obviously it's really random, so I don't think we even won, because you couldn't even predict what was going to burn next. But I always felt like the optimal choice was an easy choice. So overall, it's a cool game. I think a lot of people would enjoy it. But if I ever had the choice of playing this and Pandemic, it's really a no-brainer to me. I would always lean towards Pandemic. If someone recommended playing Flashpoint to me, I would certainly play it. And it doesn't take long. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a cool kind of dynamic game. There's kind of explosions happen and walls fall down and stuff like that. But yeah, it's certainly not a game that I'll be adding to my collection. I've got Pandemic, which just blows out the water in kind of every respect, in my opinion. But yeah, it's a solid 6 out of 10 for me. And again, I would play it again, and it's kind of nice and chilled. It's fun. It is what it is, basically. So that's Flashpoint Fire Rescue. The final game I'm going to talk about is the Gallerist. Now, this is an extremely heavy worker placement Euro game. The game's theme is pretty cool. Basically, each player has their own art gallery, and they're trying to buy, collect, and sell art. They're also trying to kind of increase the celebrity status of the artists, so they can kind of sell their art for more of a profit than when they bought them for. They're trying to fulfill contracts or commissions, I think they're called, by by selling their paintings to certain collectors. They're also trying to kind of get VIPs into their gallery in order to unlock other kind of combinations and stuff. It's extremely complicated. I think the game took, or the owner of the game took over half an hour to explain the rules to us, and even after then, I think none of us understood what we were actually had to do. It's one of those games where you're really going to have to want to play it in order to enjoy it. The game ended up taking us over 4.5 hours, I think, including the rules explanation, that is. And even then, I felt like I kind of didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of focused on 1 or 2 areas of the board where there was a another 2 areas that I completely kind of ignored. There's a lot to take in. It's very fiddly. It's very, very complicated and heavy, as I said. Now, the parts of the board work kind of really well together, and there's some really good connectivity here. The way that one area of the board makes you increase the popularity of these artists. One is the contracts area. One is the kind of I don't even know what one of the areas is. It was so kind of well, there are so many different rules to learn and so many exceptions to the rules and stuff. It was just an absolute kind of brain burner. It was very, very confusing to me, and I kind of left the game feeling like I really would have rather played several other lighter games. Now, I'm really not opposed to long games, providing that I get some fun back in return. I mean, I'm very happy sitting there playing a 5-hour game of Through the Ages. I absolutely love that game because I'm engaged the whole way through. I'm constantly looking forward to my next move. This one, I had no idea what I was doing, and you're probably going to have to play this 3 or 4 times before you even kind of get your head around a lot of the mechanisms. And it's just not one of those games that I'm prepared to do that with. I'm not invested enough in the theme. I'm not invested enough in wanting to learn the game in the first place. And I think 3 out of the 4 players felt the same way as I did. Now, don't get me wrong, there is going to be a market for this game, people who like those really heavy, complicated Euro games, but I think it's safe to say this game is not for me. I have no intention of ever playing it again. I just didn't enjoy it at all. That being said, the game looked very nice. There was some really nice components in there. I think you even got like little mini easels, and you get these, or all the components in fact were very nice. The board is very clean looking. Yeah, it was a very pretty game. But when the mechanics aren't there for me, it just didn't do anything for me at all. And as I said, it's just a write-off for me. I'm never going to play this again. I'm not going to waste another 4 hours playing it. Now, obviously it was the first game we've played of the Gallerist, so I'm sure that you can get that play time right down, but again, I have no interest in going back to it. So that's the Gallerist. Unfortunately, it's a big miss for me, this one. Again, I'm sure there's a great game underneath all the rules, but I personally wasn't willing to sit by and learn all the rules. It just wasn't fun. Okay, so that's the end of the show. I hope you've enjoyed this this different kind of approach I've taken by doing 4 reviews, hopefully in a quick amount of time. So if you've enjoyed, please hit like and subscribe to my channel. And for everyone else, I will see you next time on Chairman of the Board.